One of the promises of the blockchain is that for every centralized incumbent that already exists, there is a promise that a decentralized model is going to challenge them. And we have 4 entrepreneurs that are each tackling the space from a different direction. So let's start by going from this side on, and start by telling us, so who do you consider to be your central-based competition, and what's your unique value proposition against them? So how do you position yourself versus what already exists, and how are you doing it differently?
Sure. So Graphite is a secure, decentralized, private productivity suite. So the natural competition there is Google Docs, Dropbox, Paper, the whole suite there of business tools. And I think the key value proposition is pretty simple. It's the fact that Graphite never touches any user data. We don't have access to any of it. Everything's encrypted with keys that each individual user owns, and it's all the data is stored in storage hubs that each individual user owns as well. So I had a friend actually who had this nice little analogy that I like to use as the key value proposition. It's, imagine you're at a Starbucks, you're working on your laptop, and you have to go to the restroom. Well, you can leave your laptop there and trust that your neighbor is not going to snoop on your data or steal your data. Or imagine a world where there's a simple, convenient safe that you could put your laptop in. And then when you come back, you get it, and everything's safe. That second world is the one that Graphite is creating, and that's the key value proposition. Okay.
Brian, you're doing, you're tackling e-commerce.
Yeah, so for us, our perspective is that there's kind of like short-term competitors and there's long-term competitors. We pitch ourselves as like the decentralized Amazon, which obviously as a small company, you're not going to take on Amazon on day one. But that's the eventual goal, right, is to like be in a position like that. But our short-term competitors are both centralized and decentralized, and also come in different forms. So there's companies that are trying to get people to spend cryptocurrency more frequently by giving discounts and rewards, and by creating plugins that kind of lock into the existing centralized e-commerce ecosystem. And so those are kind of competitors because they're taking people that want to spend crypto away from our platform and putting them into like these centralized competitors who don't accept crypto yet or are not really sure if they want to accept crypto. So those are primarily our short-term competitors. On the decentralized side, there's not a lot going on. It's proven to be pretty complex technology to build, and I think it takes a lot of effort to roll something like that out, and we haven't really seen much activity in that space. So,
Ted, you have a long history of being in the market, and now?
Yeah, so just a little bit of history. So I started a chat app called Kik over 10 years ago now. Kik today is one of the most popular chat apps in the world. Most recently valued at $1 billion by Tencent, the largest technology company in China. So that's been great. We get to build this chat app, we get to compete in the market. There's just been one challenge, is how do you make money? In consumer apps today, the model is dominated by these monopolies, Facebook and Google, that the only way to make money is with advertising. And they have a monopoly on that. They get like 95% of all the advertising dollars. So one is we had no way to make money. So we just kept trying to innovate, raise money until we could find something. But then two is, because they have a monopoly on the way to make money, anything interesting you come out with, they'll just copy it, launch it themselves, and try to crush you. So we've spent the last 10 years trying to solve these problems, and that's been a very difficult thing. This is where we think crypto could be a fundamental game changer for us and other developers out there. We first started working on crypto as a solution to this in 2011. If you can believe it, it took that much time to figure out the technology, figure out the economics, to the point where we launched Kin, which is a cryptocurrency money for the digital world 2 years ago. Actually here on this stage is when we first announced it. And what Kin is, it's a fundamentally new way for consumer app developers to make money. You don't have to do advertising, you just get people using a currency that grows the economy, and then you get the value that's created from that. But it's also a way for these developers to work together. Now that we're all in sort of one ecosystem running on one currency, we have over 40 apps now where Kin is live in their apps. up to it's like around 100 million monthly active users in the overall Kin ecosystem. We support each other because we all want the same thing. We want Kin to become more valuable. So if I can create something interesting that makes development easier and open source it, and then you can use it, and that helps you, that's a win for both of us. So that's sort of our competitor is these monopolies, Facebook specifically, who owns app number 1, 2, 3, and 4 globally, and giving developers a new way to make money and a new way to band together to compete with them.
Brian, your project is a bit newer than the other three, so tell us about it.
So I'm the co-founder of the Foam protocol. The mission of Foam is to build a consensus-driven map of the world. And kind of the starting point of the project was that there are no geospatial tools or standards for blockchain developers whatsoever. So we started out building things like geospatial encoding standards and ways to kind of visualize smart contracts with spatial data. So we have something called the spatial index, kind of a cross between a Bloomberg terminal and a Google Maps. And these are all just general tools for developers to use geospatial aspects in Web3 or blockchain. The current product that we have that's live today is called the Foam map. It's a token curated registry as a way to kind of generate a registry of verified geospatial data, meaning points of interest data. And today this kind of data is extremely hard to keep track of because it's ephemeral, but it's also extremely expensive, where Google Maps has one of the most expensive developer APIs, and they've actually been raising their prices quite recently. But we also see there's a huge community of open source mappers, namely from OpenStreetMap. But there is no incentive for anybody to check any of that data, so there's tons of people adding it. And then companies like Facebook or Uber, or namely Mapbox, then are the ones in charge of protecting the map, running algorithms and paying human workers to check all the OpenStreetMap data. Then they fix it up and sell it back to people for apps like City Bike or Street Easy, et cetera. So with this kind of model, we've tried to incentivize open source mapping, but also through the token curated registry, a way to have an incentive for people to check on that data, because you have to stake tokens to add data, that there's an incentive to check on it even a year later, and you could win tokens by curating the map. So we've have over 10,000 points added since launching a few months ago. 500 have been challenged off, and the idea is to reduce information asymmetry and have a registry of on-chain data. So eventually smart contracts that want to reference geospatial data, they don't need to go off-chain, they don't need to pay an oracle, they don't need to pay API fees. There's going to be this open registry of data, and the mechanisms of our protocol will generate that data. Longer term, we want to go after location verification, and kind of the incumbent there is GPS, but we're not exactly competing with them. We want to offer a new value add service where you can actually verify location by interacting with a radio system. So that's kind of a new value add that these satellites don't provide.
So how do you incentivize those users to spend time to give you that data, because you depend on them?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's kind of when you look at like Waze or Google Guides or these OpenStreetMap, you have this kind of baseline incentive of just like people who really care about their local data or are enthusiastic about mapping. But for us, we have this like extra layer of incentive where you have a stake in the protocol, you can earn reputation, there's a leaderboard, and people have their competitive spirit, and then you can actually start to earn tokens by voting and participating in curation process.
So the token is really used primarily as a utility.
Yeah, it's you need it to contribute work to the protocol as a cartographer, or then to kind of curate data during disputes.
Can anybody earn it? Or is it just this? So it's an earning, or is it a spending?
Yeah, you don't really spend it, so it's not a currency. It's more like you need it to contribute work or vote on things. So if you have it, you can use it, and then you could earn more by using it.
Okay. I want to go back to Brian and Justin and talk about the value proposition. What is really unique about what you are doing so that users come to you? And then we're going to go and talk about challenges and with Ted, because that's an important aspect. Because I didn't think we heard that very well. Like, why would somebody go to Graphite when they can go to Google Docs, in a nutshell?
Yeah, I think that one to me is pretty simple and pretty obvious. It's probably obvious to most people in this room, but the challenge, of course, is convincing people that are not in this room. And that's that there's two problems with Google or any of these centralized incumbents is they control your data, right? So at any point, a Google engineer can pull up any one of your Google Docs. Whether you believe that's true or not, it is true. They can do that. And the other problem is they can lock you out of that data. And it's not just that data. It's not just Google Docs. Graphite uses a decentralized identity system for the specific reason that I don't want any user to ever be locked out of Graphite, no matter what my decisions are, no matter what a government's decision is. But with Google, you use Google for so many different logins, and if they revoke that access, you're locked out of not just your Google Docs, your Google Drive, you're locked out of every single app that you've used that as an authentication mechanism. So Graphite's different in the fact that you can't be locked out, and Graphite can't snoop on your data, can't access your data. We can't hand it over to any government or a bad actor that may get access to Graphite as a company, won't have access to your data.
So the main thing is about owning your own data instead of Google owning it.
Yes, absolutely.
So Brian, you have a number of these value propositions that are unique, that nobody else can get altogether, right? And what are they?
Yeah, I mean, I guess to understand the value proposition for OpenBazaar, you have to kind of go back and look at how we even got here, which is, the internet became this hugely interconnected global tool that made it so that people could do trade with anybody around the world, instantly. And so these, but the only way technologically that we could actually facilitate that was to have these middlemen, kind of like eBays and Amazons and stuff, set up shop so that there's a centralized marketplace where you can match buyers and sellers. And for that, benefit, they've basically taken these huge amount of fees and they've gathered your data and sold it off as search, feeding into search systems and advertising systems. And so it's just created this huge, big mess. And then it's gotten worse and worse over time where now they're just like doing all this vertical integration where like it's just so easy to give away all of your life to these systems like Amazon because it's ordering toilet paper for you when you don't even know you need it. And so it's just part of your life. But you don't realize what you're giving away in terms of privacy, security, financial freedom. I think now what we've done is we've gotten to a point with cryptocurrencies and decentralized peer-to-peer networks. We've got the technology now to kind of unbundle all that incumbent infrastructure. And so that's what we're working on doing. We're building peer-to-peer networks that are resilient, that are censorship resistant, that governments can't shut down on a whim. We're building more private software that protects your data, like he's saying, where they're not just snooping on you and selling it and prioritizing other companies that pay them, to sell you products. So there's a lot of like very complex stuff going on there. And the value proposition sometimes can be very like subtle because people don't go out and go, hey, I want to get a private thing, I want to go do a bunch of private things right now. It's just inherent in what you need as a human. But we are seeing a lot of traction in privacy-focused products, like DuckDuckGo as a search engine is being used much more broadly. We're seeing Brave browser. We're seeing all these kind of privacy-focused things start to accelerate, and we want to be in that space in terms of commerce. And because there really is no alternative to Amazon if you're trying to do some private commerce, and especially globally. So that's where we're trying to play.
You have a multi-currency wallet. That's a unique thing. Tell us.
Yeah, and we also have a multi-currency wallet. So
that's unique. Not too many
well, a lot of
apps
companies
have
either have like a Bitcoin and kind of Bitcoin-related currency wallet, and a lot of them have Ethereum and Ethereum-based token wallets. But there's not a lot of like overlap there, and we play and we run the gamut. So we have Bitcoin, which is fairly public, but it goes on to Zcash, which is like for privacy-focused focused individuals, or Litecoin for more priority transactions, things like that. So we're trying to address a broad community, not just like one specific type of crypto user.
And the users can go and get on the wait list now. You have GetHaven is. Yeah.
So OpenBazaar is our desktop app, and we're releasing a mobile app on Android and iOS in the next few weeks. It's called Haven. You can sign up for the beta list on gethaven.app.
And you're giving out T-shirts.
Oh yeah, and I'm going to be giving away T-shirts, so please take them, so I don't have to bring them back to Washington D.C.
Upstairs.
Yeah, upstairs
right.
After this.
Now, it's not all rosy as it sounded so far. Challenges are here, and not just from a technological point of view. So, Ted, what has been your experience to date in terms of rolling out KIN as a cryptocurrency for the world?
So building new things with this technology and actually getting people to use it, developers to use it, is incredibly complex. And I think we all know that: blockchain, scaling, fees, user experience. So I think that's a big part of it, is the technology and user experience side. We actually feel pretty good about that. So in the last 30 days alone, we had over 1 million people across those 40 apps actually earn KIN. We call them monthly active earners. And we had over 300,000, we actually just crossed that today, people spend KIN in the last 30 days. So between those two metrics, KIN is actually the most earned and spent cryptocurrency in the world. And that's been a lot of challenges, the product, the tech, all these things. But the biggest challenge has been for us, what has been growing is it's actually nothing to do with the product or the technology. That's hard, but what is emerging as harder is the regulation and the lack of uncertainty there. For us, this started pretty slow. We did our token sale in 2017. We now sit here. And at first it was like, oh, that's interesting. The SEC reaches out. That's interesting. And we're like, yeah, that is interesting. It's exciting. We'd love to learn more if you're willing to come chat with us. And okay, we'll come chat with you, sure. So we go chat with them, and KIN's off and running at this point. And hey, actually, we just want to ask some more questions. Actually, we want to ask some other people some questions. Actually, we want to make sure we get the right information. So we have these things called subpoenas, but don't worry, they're not scary. They're just to make sure we get the right information. Actually, why don't you come down to Washington and testify in front of a camera? And actually, now you get this thing called a Wells notice, which is our intention to recommend to the commission that they file a lawsuit against you. I'm like, whoa, okay, I thought we were friends, but that escalated over the last 12 months. And what you realize is, we've been trying very hard with them to find the win-win. In fact, we have spent over $5 million working with the SEC. $5 million that could be going to innovation. But again, we're like, listen, they're in a tough spot. Let's try to figure this out. And it's just becoming increasingly clear that to us, they're just trying to shut this whole space down. And so we're at a point, what we have found to be most damaging is we have become consumed with this question, but what will the SEC think? But what will the SEC think? Hey, we could do consensus in this way, but what will the SEC think? Oh, we could get this partner on board, but what will the SEC think? We could do the token economics in this way, but what will the SEC think? We spend more time designing for the SEC than we do for our users and developers. And where this has become incredibly dangerous recently is what we've seen happen with Binance and Coinbase. Here's Coinbase, a great company trying to do something amazing in the United States, and Binance comes out of nowhere and says, we're gonna do that thing, but we're gonna do it everywhere but the US. So we never have to ask the question internally, but what will the SEC think? And in the last 18 months, Binance has replaced Coinbase as the top exchange in the world. We do not want to get Binanced. And so it's coming to a point where for us, the biggest challenge is you keep telling us clarity is coming, but it never comes. And we're at a point where we now, by trying to serve the US, have a fundamental disadvantage versus everybody who will do it not in the US. And so I think for us, that has become the biggest challenge, is the regulatory lack of clarity.
Yeah, I think.
I assume that's not for the SEC.
We have to fight the SEC. I was talking to a European lawyer yesterday, and them observing what's going on here, he was surprised that how come nobody is fighting the SEC and just assuming that whatever they say is the way it's going to be. We're going to talk a lot on
Just can I add to that? Because there's a great anecdote in there, which is, it's interesting talking to lawyers outside the U.S. So I was talking to a lawyer in Switzerland, and I'm like, so at this point, what do you recommend? Do people just know you should do it everywhere but the U.S.? He's like, it's actually funnier than that. When people come to us, they say, yeah, we want to do this thing in the whole world, everywhere except China and the U.S. And he says, yeah, that's half right. You can definitely do it in China, but yeah, not in the US. That's ridiculous. That is crazy.
But Ryan, you were able to kind of dodge that bullet because why? You were a bit smart in your way you've designed it?
Well, I definitely agree, and I'm sympathetic with Ted in that the lack of clarity is extremely troubling around the SEC. We've been regardless of the lack of clarity, in best faith trying to launch our software product and get it in the hands of users and consumers. So when we did our token sale, unlike many others, we made sure that the mainnet would be at the time of the sale, so that when people were purchasing the tokens, they were attesting to be users, and they would be able to use it right away. In addition to kind of KYC, we had different anti-speculative measures in that you had to answer different questions to kind of attest and prove you had read our white paper, used our beta, understood what you were buying. And the idea was that there was no pre-sale or discount, so it's the same terms for all participants, whether you were buying an extremely large amount or extremely small amount. But what's even more is that all users tested to do something called proof of use, kind of a riff off of like proof of work from Bitcoin. And this was that they had to use a certain % of their tokens on the mainnet before they could ever even move them to another wallet, let alone trade or exchange or speculate. And that turned off a lot of people who obviously were interested in speculation. But what it did was attract a really healthy group of over 1,000 users who attested to want to use the token. And then this was actually then governed by a smart contract. So on the Ethereum blockchain, which is where Foam lives, there would be a contract called the token controller that would actually see if you've added enough points to the map or you had used enough % through either votes or challenges. And once you passed that threshold, you were able to kind of exit the platform and move your tokens around. But what that did is that we have an enormous amount of users now. So it's a small community in that sense, but they're contributing a lot of work. And we have a really kind of distributed community. So we had people from all different parts of the world, but also all different capital sizes and all part of the same terms. And it was really great to see kind of people using it right away. And that's kind of the way we went about our sale.
Well, what if your token starts to trade outside? Is that an issue or?
It may be, given the lack of clarity. So there is a secondary market for Foam that has emerged, but to ever even participate in that market, you had to have used your tokens. But what we're actually seeing is the volume is not extremely high for Foam, but partners like Circle and Poloniex see a lot of value in our token anyway to make sure it's available for users. And in kind of in the external games that people are now building on top of our map, like a scavenger hunt for NFTs, you can see in real time people buying tokens on Poloniex or even Uniswap and going straight into the map. We had a lot of challenges on the map last week, about 25, and the voting contract went from 400K tokens to 800K to 2 million to ultimately 8 million. And you seeing people buying on exchanges and sending it straight to the voting contract. So we are trading slightly below where we sold our token, and part of the market downturn, but the market activity we do see is really for use.
What's a scavenger NFT? Can you explain that in layman's language?
Sure. So there's a project called Block Cities. They make rare NFTs of architecture, and so there's a going on this week. It's called the Block Cities Foam NFT. And the idea is it's like a mystery game. So there'll be a building, like for example, yesterday was Barclays Center, and tweets tweeted out about the clue of the building. And if you can solve the clue and determine what building it is, if you add that point to the Foam map, you'll win this rare NFT of a block city of that building. And we actually have Microsoft Azure engineers that made a logic app in the cloud. So it's actually listening to the Foam API, and if someone adds the right point, it'll auto-tweet somebody won and issue out the reward. And it's really exciting to see people who are very new to Foam and going to Uniswap, buying a few hundred Foam and going straight to the game and competing to win these NFTs.
So it's a good way to gamify the usage. Justin, you're the only one without a token. But let's move on to the common part, which is you are building a decentralized app. So what advice, to kind of end the panel asking everybody, what advice do you have to others who are planning to build or are building decentralized apps, services, peer-to-peer networks? What's been your experience from a building point of view?
Get lucky. I mean, honestly, it's building any app, decentralized or not. People ask for advice on how do you make this successful? How is the next wave of entrepreneurs going to be successful? And if we're all being honest with ourselves, everybody gets lucky that it has any sort of a success. The trick is capitalizing on that luck, right? Squeezing every ounce of that luck out of whatever you've gained to make the product successful. From the decentralized side of this, my advice would be to stop focusing on it being decentralized, right? If you want to get adoption outside of the community that's already interested in crypto, already interested in blockchain, you have to convey your product as just a product, not this special decentralized product. Decentralization is the tool, right? But you need to sell the value of decentralization. That would probably be my advice for anybody building in this space, whether you're using a token or not.
But it's going to end up, it looks like a regular app. We're going to talk about apps more in the afternoon. But I mean, you're very user-friendly. Haven is going to be very user-friendly on the mobile app. It is already on desktop. Kin and Kinit is super user-friendly. I think Foam, you're a little bit on the technical side. I think you've told me you wanted to improve that. So user interface is important. So you want to hide the decentralization aspects, right?
Yeah, so it's a little bit involved in that even to vote, you need to commit your vote, come back a few days later, reveal your vote. You're paying gas each time. So our user experience we're really proud of in that it's a really advanced DApp, but it still requires some technical knowledge. But there's some amazing tools now, for example, like from Dapper Labs, the Dapper wallet, which we're going to be potentially integrating with, and that like automatically pays gas fees for users, so that kind of reduces some friction. And then different kind of in-app DEX integrations, so if a new user comes there, they could obtain tokens without ever leaving the map. And then, of course, mobile functioning UX, which we'll develop soon as well. So there'll be ways to kind of get people into that. But it's important to remember Foam is a protocol. So these are kind of, should be technical users in some sense. And we have a grant program and a hackathon this weekend. And ideally, people can build kind of apps on top that kind of abstract blockchain altogether.
So Brian, the way OpenBazaar is architected is that every user is almost like a node. So from that perspective, I mean, there aren't too many apps or dApps that are connected together in a peer-to-peer network.
Yeah, we were actually talking in the room back there about whether or not OpenBazaar really can be considered a dApp, because people kind of refer to a dApp as being like an Ethereum application that runs completely on the blockchain. And in our case, we really only use the blockchain for the payment layer. And so really it's like our separate peer-to-peer network, which we built on top of IPFS, is where all of the logic and the complexity of how the marketplace runs happens. And so in order to do that, each person who runs the software becomes like a so-called node on the network and contributes to the way that it functions. And that is one of the primary reasons why we never really existed on mobile and we haven't been on the web, is because it's very complex to write like server-based software that runs in a browser and completely JavaScript or on a mobile device because of the resources that are needed to run it, and the fact that most people turn off their phones most of the time, and you need it to be connected. But we're starting to get to the point where this technology is feasible. We actually run the exact same code that we run on the desktop. We run it on the mobile device now. And so all your data is not being pushed to central servers where it's stored and siloed, even encrypted. It's all encrypted and it's stored on your device. And they all connect directly. So if I'm going to buy something from you in China, our two mobile devices connect directly to each other, and we do encrypted trade between each other. We chat encrypted. We do data sharing. It's all direct encrypted and not going through middlemen. So we think it's a pretty unique thing that we haven't seen anybody really do, and we've worked on it for a long, long time. So we're hoping it does well.
Right. Ted, you forked your own blockchain. Would you do it again? How difficult has it been?
Yeah, so I think one thing that's interesting about Kin is we are less focused on the technology. I think what's really interesting about this panel is the technology serves the solution instead of vice versa. I think a lot of crypto, let's build a platform and then who knows what will get built. Whereas up here, we each have a specific thing we're trying to build. So for Kin, we're trying to build money for the digital world. And so we just need all the pieces, however we can get them, to make that work. So for example, we started on Ethereum. Obviously, that crashed immediately. We didn't have the scalability, so we moved to Stellar. Okay, check. We solved the scalability issue, but we talk about fees for consumers. Consumers were confused, like, I just want to send one kin. What is this 0.1 kin, that gets taken away along the way? And so we needed to come up with a different way to do fees. And so instead of taking the fees for the users, we built a consensus-driven whitelist for who could get feeless transactions. So we forked Stellar again. We launched our own blockchain, the Kin blockchain. We moved to that over the last 2 months. So I think what's different around us is, like, would we do it again? Yes, because we had to. We didn't want to build our own blockchain, but if we wanted to build money for the digital world, we needed scalability and we needed feeless transactions that would work for consumers. And the only way to get that, we looked at all the options, was go from Ethereum to Stellar to our own custom fork of Stellar. So it's not something we did for fun, it's something we did out of necessity.
You didn't do it for fun?
We did not do it for fun.
Seems like you're having so much fun, though.
Okay. Great, sounds good. So with that, let's go to the next panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you.